He thought it was harmless, just a small daily habit, something millions of people do without a second thought. No pain, no warning, no reason to worry. But inside his body, subtle changes were building quietly over time. Blood vessels stiffened, inflammation rose, the heart worked harder than it should have. Then one ordinary day it happened. What seemed insignificant had slowly created the perfect conditions for a heart attack. It did not look dangerous. There was no dramatic warning label, no sharp pain, no immediate consequence. It was part of his routine, woven into normal life so smoothly that it barely registered as a choice. Many people share the same belief. If something feels ordinary, it must be safe. If it does not cause instant discomfort, it cannot be harming the heart. That assumption is where the real risk begins. The human heart is remarkably strong, but it is also highly responsive to daily patterns. Every repeated behavior sends signals. Through the bloodstream, through hormones, and through the nervous system. When a habit becomes automatic, the body adapts to it. Sometimes that adaptation is positive. Sometimes it quietly increases strain. In this case, the habit slowly elevated stress chemistry inside the body. Cortisol levels crept higher. Blood vessels tightened slightly more than they should. Blood pressure inched upward, not enough to cause alarm, but enough to create friction along delicate arterial walls. Over time, that friction irritates the lining of the arteries, making them more vulnerable to plaque buildup. What makes this so deceptive is that the body compensates beautifully. The heart beats a little stronger, the vessels adjust. Energy still feels normal. There is no obvious crisis. Years can pass this way. Meanwhile, low-grade inflammation begins to simmer. Cholesterol particles stick more easily to irritated artery walls. Small deposits grow into larger ones. The habit still feels harmless. It might even feel comforting. That is why it persists. The danger lies in repetition. The cardiovascular system does not respond to one isolated action. It responds to patterns. When strain is repeated daily, the heart gradually loses flexibility. Arteries stiffen. Recovery time slows. The margin for error becomes thinner. Nothing dramatic happens at first. That is exactly why it goes unnoticed. Understanding this is the first step toward protection. The heart rarely fails without warning. It whispers long before it screams. And in many cases, those whispers are tied to routines we once believed were completely safe. To understand how something that feels harmless can become dangerous, you have to look beneath the surface. The body does not react with drama at first. It reacts with chemistry. Each time the habit is repeated, stress signals move through the bloodstream. Adrenaline may rise slightly. Cortisol may stay elevated a little longer than it should. Blood vessels tighten just a bit. This tightening increases pressure inside the arteries. At first it seems insignificant, but arteries are lined with a delicate layer of cells called the endothelium. These cells control how blood flows, how vessels relax, and how inflammation is managed. When pressure and stress hormones stay elevated over time, that lining becomes irritated. Tiny injuries form along the artery wall. The body attempts to repair them, but repeated strain makes full recovery difficult. In response, inflammatory markers increase. The blood becomes slightly more prone to clotting. Cholesterol particles, especially small, dense LDL, begin to stick to those irritated areas. This is how plaque begins. Plaque does not appear overnight. It builds slowly, layer by layer, often without symptoms. As it grows, arteries become less flexible. They cannot expand as easily to handle increased demand during physical activity or emotional stress. The heart must work harder to push blood through narrower pathways. Over months and years, this extra workload thickens the heart muscle and reduces efficiency. Meanwhile, blood pressure may creep upward, not enough to cause immediate alarm, but enough to add more force against already stressed vessels. Insulin sensitivity may decline. Blood sugar fluctuations can increase inflammation even further. It becomes a cycle. The most important part to understand is this: the body adapts until it cannot. For a long time, everything feels stable. Energy seems normal. There is no sharp pain. But underneath, the cardiovascular system is losing resilience. The margin for recovery is shrinking. What once required little effort now demands more from the heart. This is how a habit that feels small begins to shape a much larger outcome. The damage is not loud, it is cumulative, and when the tipping point finally arrives, it feels sudden, even though the process began years earlier. Long before a heart attack occurs, the body sends signals. The problem is that these signals rarely look dramatic. They blend into daily life, they feel explainable, they are easy to dismiss. One of the earliest signs is unusual fatigue. Not the kind that follows intense work or a late night, but a deeper, lingering tiredness that does not fully improve with rest. When arteries begin to narrow and blood flow becomes less efficient, muscles and organs receive slightly less oxygen. The body compensates, but that compensation requires effort. Over time, even simple activities can feel more draining. Another subtle warning sign is shortness of breath during tasks that once felt easy. Climbing stairs, carrying groceries, or walking at a steady pace may leave you slightly winded. Many people blame this on aging, stress, or being out of shape. But sometimes it reflects reduced cardiovascular efficiency. The heart is working harder to meet demand. Sleep changes can also signal strain. You may notice difficulty falling asleep, waking frequently, or feeling unrefreshed in the morning. Elevated stress hormones and unstable blood pressure patterns can disrupt natural sleep cycles. Poor sleep then increases inflammation and further stresses the heart, creating a reinforcing loop. Some people experience mild chest tightness or pressure that comes and goes. It may not feel sharp or severe, it may last only minutes and then disappear. This is often ignored because it does not resemble the dramatic pain associated with heart attacks. Yet temporary restriction in blood flow can cause brief discomfort long before a major event. Even subtle changes in heart rhythm can be overlooked. Occasional fluttering, pounding, or a racing heartbeat during periods of rest may signal that the nervous system is under strain. The key issue is interpretation. When symptoms are mild, the mind searches for harmless explanations. Stress, busy schedule, getting older, a bad night of sleep. But the heart does not suddenly fail without a story leading up to it. These early signs are part of that story. They are the body asking for attention while there is still time to change the outcome. Recognizing them is not about fear, it is about awareness before the tipping point arrives. For years, the body adapts, it compensates, it manages. Then one day, the balance shifts. A heart attack rarely begins with a dramatic explosion inside the chest. It often starts with something much smaller. A vulnerable plaque sitting quietly inside a coronary artery becomes unstable. The surface cracks or ruptures. The body responds instantly, just as it would to a cut on the skin. Platelets rush to the area to form a clot. But inside a narrowed artery, that clot has nowhere to go. Within minutes, blood flow through that vessel can drop sharply or stop completely. The part of the heart muscle supplied by that artery is suddenly starved of oxygen. Heart cells are highly active and depend on constant oxygen delivery. When that supply is interrupted, damage begins quickly. This is why the event feels sudden. One moment, everything seems normal. The next, there may be intense chest pressure, heaviness, squeezing, or pain that spreads to the arm, jaw, or back. Some people experience nausea, cold sweating, or overwhelming fatigue. Others, especially older adults and people with diabetes, may have more subtle symptoms such as breathlessness or unusual weakness. The tipping point is not random. It is the result of years of gradual change reaching a threshold. The arteries have narrowed enough. Inflammation has remained active long enough. The heart has been under strain long enough. When the final trigger happens, whether physical stress, emotional stress, dehydration, or even early morning hormonal shifts, the system can no longer absorb the impact. What makes this so powerful to understand is that the crisis is often the final chapter of a long story. The rupture may take seconds, but the conditions that made it possible were building silently for years. This is not meant to create fear, it is meant to create clarity. When you understand how the tipping point forms, you realize that prevention does not require dramatic action. It requires consistent attention long, before symptoms become severe. The heart does not demand perfection. It demands protection before the margin of safety disappears. A single habit rarely acts alone. The heart responds to patterns, and when several risk factors overlap, the effect is not additive. It becomes exponential. Consider diet. Highly processed foods rich in refined sugar and unhealthy fats increase inflammation and disrupt cholesterol balance. When blood sugar rises sharply and repeatedly, it damages the lining of blood vessels. Over time, this makes plaque formation easier. If this pattern continues for years, the arteries gradually lose flexibility and strength. Now add chronic stress. Persistent psychological stress keeps cortisol and adrenaline elevated. These hormones increase blood pressure and heart rate. They also make blood more prone to clotting. Even if stress feels manageable on the surface, the cardiovascular system feels every surge. Poor sleep compounds the damage. When sleep is short or fragmented, blood pressure does not dip properly at night. The heart misses its recovery window, inflammation increases, insulin sensitivity declines. The body remains in a state of subtle alertness instead of repair. Physical inactivity is another multiplier. Movement is not just about burning calories. Regular activity improves blood vessel elasticity, enhances circulation, and helps regulate blood sugar. Without it, the cardiovascular system becomes less resilient. The heart muscle may weaken and arteries stiffen more quickly. Smoking and dehydration further increase risk. Tobacco chemicals directly injure the artery lining and accelerate plaque growth. Inadequate hydration thickens the blood slightly, making circulation less efficient and increasing strain on the heart. When these factors combine, they create a perfect environment for instability. Elevated blood pressure presses against already irritated vessel walls. High blood sugar feeds inflammation. Stress hormones amplify every reaction. The margin of safety narrows. The important realization is that risk is rarely about one dramatic behavior. It is about clusters of habits that reinforce one another. Each factor may seem manageable on its own. Together, they change the landscape inside the arteries. Understanding these multipliers shifts the focus from blame to strategy. When you identify the patterns working against your heart, you also uncover the patterns that can protect it. Prevention becomes a matter of breaking the chain before it tightens. The most powerful truth about heart health is this: the same system that can be damaged slowly can also be strengthened slowly. The heart responds to consistent signals. When those signals change, the outcome changes. Start with circulation. Daily movement improves blood vessel flexibility and supports healthy blood pressure. This does not require extreme workouts. A brisk walk, light resistance training, or even consistent stretching improves oxygen delivery and reduces arterial stiffness. What matters most is regularity. When movement becomes part of your routine, the heart adapts in a positive direction. Nutrition is the second pillar. Focus on whole foods rich in fiber, healthy fats, and antioxidants. Vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds, and fatty fish support the arterial lining and reduce inflammation. Reducing refined sugars and heavily processed foods lowers blood sugar spikes and protects vessel walls from damage. Small, steady dietary improvements create measurable changes in cholesterol and inflammatory markers over time. Stress regulation is just as critical. The heart cannot distinguish between physical danger and emotional strain. Breathing exercises, time outdoors, structured relaxation, and meaningful social connection help lower stress hormones. When cortisol levels stabilize, blood pressure and heart rate become more balanced. Sleep must also become non-negotiable. Aim for consistent sleep patterns and a dark, quiet environment. During deep sleep, the body repairs tissues and regulates blood pressure. This nightly reset is essential for long-term cardiovascular resilience. Routine health checks complete the strategy. Monitoring blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, and weight provides early insight before problems escalate. Data removes guesswork. It allows for adjustments before damage accumulates. The key is not perfection, it is consistency. Each protective habit strengthens the cardiovascular system from the inside out. Over time, arteries regain flexibility. Inflammation decreases. The heart becomes more efficient and resilient. If this story feels familiar, let it serve as a turning point rather than a warning. The heart is remarkably responsive to change, even after years of strain. Small decisions made daily shape the future of your circulation, your energy, and your longevity. Pay attention to the whispers before they become alarms. Protecting your heart is not about fear. It is about giving your body the steady support it has needed all along.